Okay, good morning. Good morning, Zeb. Come on in. That's on-the-spot recruiting right there, right?
No pressure.
That's right, no pressure. One of the things that I used to love, though, was Sherry's father, Darvin, when he used to teach. He was 94 years old when he taught in here. And he was old school. He would call you out. You could not sneak into his class. He'd be like, oh, good morning, know your name. Oh, good morning, Ray. I'm so glad you could join us late. Boom.
He couldn't even see you and he still called you.
It was hilarious. We'll try to be a little less direct than that. So good morning. We're going to continue our lesson series this morning on the game of life. As always, our memory verse. The goal is to complete the race while keeping the faith. So first additional verse this morning, Psalms 127. Because this morning we're going to take a slight detour. We'll talk about that momentarily. And we're going to talk about children. Not the children themselves, but us as parents. So Psalm 127. It's actually a psalm about how unless the Lord is with you, everything falls apart. And it actually starts out that way. It talks about if the Lord doesn't build the house, you build it in vain. If the Lord doesn't protect the city, no one in the city can sleep, because only the Lord grants rest, because you know the city is not safe. And then it goes into children, and this is one of the verses where we get the arrow in the quiver concept of children for parents. And children are a heritage from the Lord, offspring a reward from Him, is another example in the psalm of how everything is from the Lord, and without the Lord there can be nothing. So, Psalms 127:3. Also Proverbs 22:6. So, today's game of life was brought to you by Psalms 127:3 and 22:6. Psalm 22, of course, is dependent upon the commentary you read, and there are a lot of them, easily over 100 out there, or Proverbs 22:3. 22:6, confusing my Proverbs now, is really about a name. Now, in Hebrew culture, the family name was paramount. And everyone lived together in the same village for multiple generations. And so it was easy for one person to damage a family's name. Also, the reason for which Jesus' brothers and sisters come get him when the word crazy begins to be thrown around about his early ministry. And they go and seek him. And part of it, not all of it, but part of it is this name protection that goes on in Hebrew culture and our own. And so the psalm goes through and talks about all the ways in which the fool can lose his name, can bring shame to himself. He doesn't have humility. And then it also says, as this is a family activity, part of that, of course, is how do you prevent fools in your bloodline? Well, one, you can weed them out pretty aggressively, but we're not about that. And so instead, this proverb says you train them. And we bring our children up the way we want them to be. And so we grow our own grief or sorrow. Might be a way to look at that. So I want to take a little side trip this morning because in the game, we should be right there buying a house. Yay! But I want to pause on a discussion about wealth and purchases and all that stuff before we're a little bit farther in the game. And so I want to push a little bit left on that, and I want to talk about children. Now, in the board game, the game of life, it is filthy with slots that say, congratulations, you just had a child, twins, child, twins. Their goal, of course, is to fill your car. So that when you get to the end of the game, you can count those little things as money when you're figuring out your family wealth. It's not the only way you have to go, but it is the only way you can go in the game. Okay? So, for this morning's discussion and next week's discussion, congratulations. We've had a child. I want to talk about that because I think it's important. Parameters. Conversation's not about your children. I love little Timmy as much as you do, but we're not talking about Timmy. What we are talking about is you raising your child. So this is the adulting part of that conversation. How we do it, why we do it, how does the Bible help, and what are the things that we should think about. I've thrown together a list of about 6 things. I actually made a written list of about 30. And so if you don't have anything to add, we'll just keep going down that list until we exhaust our time. But I think that there are some things that we have to... Have you ever seen someone's eyes light up because you just gave them away something free as a form of advice that just clicked in place for them? As a teacher, you've probably seen it occasionally. Someone's having trouble with a program, and you're like, dude, you do this. They're like, there's a command for that? I can make every program now much easier for myself. And it works sometimes. And parenting, I think, is like that. So, the first thing I would offer, parenting is not a spectator sport. If you want someone else to raise your child, they will. Probably not in the way you want. And I think we have to begin early. It's not the reason I think it takes 9 months to make a baby, but I think that 9 months is an amazing amount of time to talk about what's about to happen. And when is the right time to start teaching someone? I mean, the minute they open their eyes, you're teaching them. The minute they can hear, you're probably teaching them. I've got a saying about that. In every encounter, someone is training someone. Whether you want to admit it or not, it's a fact. I can prove it. Because in every encounter, someone is training someone how to react to them, how to react to others, how to think, how to behave in so many ways. And so if you think about conversations and interactions with people that way, sometimes you can do some amazing things. Sometimes you can choose to be the person who gets taught. And then it's so much easier for the teacher. Sometimes you have to force the fact that, oh no, in this encounter, I'm the teacher, and you're going to get taught. But we have to start early in that process to teach our children those concepts. So that is Proverbs 22:6. Because if we train our children every day, and then the goal, of course, is for them to leave, right? I used to tell my kids jokingly, only kind of not, 18 and 30. 18 years and 30 days, you're gone. Because the goal was to raise him in a way that he could handle his life, and he could take care of his business, and he could have his family. And that someday if I needed him, he would return, right? You laugh, but it's true. So I didn't leave that unstated in our relationship. We talked about that as he began to grow older and become more mature. If I go, here are the things I would request you to do. You can't demand anything of somebody when you're dead. That's why we have wills, right? Because if I just tell you what I want you to do when I'm gone, you do what you want. And he agreed. We have a verbal commitment, father to son, on some things I want him to do when I am no longer here. Because I trained him that was part of his obligation to the family unit. I did give him some enticement. So, there might be some financial incentives involved in some of that. But mostly, we taught his heart. Because that's where we live. Whether we think so or not. If your heart is hard, your life is hard. That's my proof. If your heart is easy, then your life is easy. So I think we have to start early. We have to start before they're born. How many of us who have children had a conscious conversation about our children and our child rearing practices before our child was born? All right. I did. I did because I only knew one thing. I didn't know how to do it, but I didn't want to do it the way it was done to me. And so I had to ask my wife, how do you produce you? I had some ideas and concepts, but she had to validate those. How about that one? We have a term for what happens when we don't do this, right? Have you ever heard that you got mom and pop? So a child goes to mom and says, "Mom, I want to go run out in traffic on the freeway on Saturday." And mom says, "It's not a great idea. Don't do that." He runs to dad and he says, "Dad, what do you think of this idea?" And he's like, "That's a great idea." Yes, you must do this thing. Can I drive you there?
I thought you were going to say, go after mom. Yes.
We're going to get there. We're going to get there.
But that's the wrong thing to say. The right thing to say is, what did your mother already say?
Maybe, but we're going to get there. So the discussion is starting, and that's exactly right, because that is where all of this needs to happen. Because how do we trade values? Through discussion and action. I present that, though, in order to make this point. God tells us children are a gift. God says everything is a gift, specifically children, though. He says that. And so part of stewardship, when it's co-ownership, is that the owners have a united front. Have you ever seen businesses run by by corporate body that are sideways with each other? The business tends to go out of business. And so we have to. And I know who's got a great example of what happens when you don't present a united front. I mean, yours was there. See, it's a teachable moment. Whenever my phone bings, it's a teachable moment.
Wow, you have a lot of teachable moments throughout the day, don't you?
I do. What you said. This is a great way to head that off all the time. Because you can't figure out everything crazy that's going to come out of little crazy's mouth, right? I think all children are born crazy. We have to teach them left and right limits, or they do things like jump off roofs and anything that begins with, "I built a ramp," from a young child is not going to end well. So we have to talk. But you can't come up with all of the different examples that they're going to do in your life.
And the reason I think that saying, "go ask your mother" or "go ask your father" is a bad way to handle it is because I think it is. Because they're going to figure out that that's what dad's always going to say, so they're always going to go to mom or they're going to convince whatever. The best way to say it is, have you already asked your mother? And if the answer to that question is yes, well, what did she say? Because then you know you're united. Or this answer here, "let me go talk to your mother," is a better way to say it than just saying, "go talk to the other." Now, if you really don't care and it doesn't really matter, and you really just want her to make the decision, and that's the way you handle it, I guess you could say that's okay, but it really should be better if you discuss it and then let her make the decision if that's what you want.
Right, in which case nobody knows. So, but there are layers to this. And so one layer is that you're teaching your children that you and your mother, his mother, their mother, talk. The second is that you're teaching them that when you bring information to me, I'm going to go fact check you. Because your mother and I have to be in agreement on, one, what you said, and two, whether or not we approve of the act that we're about to give you permission to perform.
That's okay, I think, did everybody hear me?
Yeah, and for our home audience, I'll re-say it, so thank you.
And I think this, so let me talk to your wife, your other spouse. I think it's a good idea. For the simple reason is, if your child is president in knowledge and grown up to understand, they see you talking together peacefully, honestly, heartfeltly, godly. If they see that you're
No, thank you. You hit about 5 of the points I ended up not putting on the paper for time, so thank you. And so I'll reiterate a little bit about what was just said. One, emotional coaching, teaching, and mentoring is important for our children. Allowing them to see us discuss things is phenomenal. And in fact, I think emotional might have made it on the list. We'll go, yes, it did. It's farther down on the list. Secondly, is that we have to talk, we have to communicate, because that teaches them how to communicate. And then every team needs a lead. Know your team lead. And then work toward each other's benefit. And I think what you said about that at the end, Joe, is exactly right. You've got to be under God. And we are going to have that discussion.
It has to be under God.
Yeah. Any other thoughts on that? How about that one? Do as I say, not as I do. That's a horrible lesson to teach, let alone learn. I was taught many negative ones like that as a child, on how to get away, get around, and get behind things. So we've got to model our behavior. And I think that's Scripture. Now, this part of Galatians, I believe, fits right in with that. We've got to be the people that God wants us to be 24/7. And we've got to grow our lives in a way that strengthens that aspect of who we are and weakens the others. And it can be tiring when you're in transition and change. My life is a story of transition and change. It is exhausting some days, keeping in the former person, because I can't get rid of him. That'd be a lie. His memories, his experiences, they all reside within me. And so at best, I can change that person. But if you put me too far in a corner, and I start to feel life-threatened, aspects of that former person will come out. You know how you know who a real person's language is? Hit his finger with a hammer. You will learn the left and right limit of his vocabulary very quickly. And so, we reveal who we are under pressure. The goal, of course, is that, thank God, we are forgiven. And I'm stealing a quote from Curtis Kastner here, part of God's grace is that we are allowed to be works in progress all the days of our lives. We just have to continue to strive to be that person God wants us to be.
So do as I say, not as I do is not a good.
Do as I say, not as I do is a bad example.
Well, I'm saying, we typically
do.
like, look, we want you to do better than us, but we can't do that. We have to be who we want them to be.
Yes. Hans.
So along that line, you teach them what they should do and show them what they should do. And then when they get older and they are being told by their friends or whatever, hey, why don't you come and do this? That is when you can utilize your past experiences in doing the wrong thing. And the reason I say it that way is you don't want to mince. You'll confuse a situation if you go, well, you need to do this, but when I was young, I did this, and that's why I know, because they'll think, okay, then it's okay to do that thing. But you wait later on, you can, to tell them why they should.
Right. So I'll get to you in just a moment, ma'am. Because I want to explain Hans's comments to our not studio audience, those of you at home. So, being the person that we want them to be gives them the strength when they are faced with their peers and that pressure to say, I don't have to be you. I can be this person that I am. And then you made the note that sometimes past experiences become teachable moments. My children know my entire past. They didn't believe it until we went home and it was validated by relatives who then offered them an invitation to likewise experience jail and other things. Because we had taught them to be someone else, they declined politely. Because I think that does both points that you just made. One, I was honest and open with them about who and what I was because I wasn't that person anymore and I didn't want them to go down that way. And I knew if we ever visited family, the offer would be made. It's our profession. They were invited into the family business, per se. And they were able to resist. And we came home, and they told wonderful stories that they said, look, I validated this story about your childhood. And I said, I wish you hadn't even had to. But, go ahead.
Well, you basically said, the important part is, I mean, our pasts are our pasts, and we need to claim them. And I don't think we should hide that from our children. Certainly share information with them at age-appropriate time, but,
There's an art to that science, yes.
yeah, I mean, you just, yeah.
What about family secrets? I have seen family secrets held for 3 generations destroy 5 generations of family. That is how horrible those things are. Much easier if they're just in the light. Then you can kick it around, and every time it comes up, everybody says, that's family knowledge. What is your problem? We did a wrong thing. We're okay. God has forgiven us. Go ahead.
And I guess that's my point, is my one point. My point is, you know, and what we've always told our children is, my sin does not make it okay for you to commit the same sin. You know, my mistakes don't entitle you to go and make those same mistakes. I'm sharing this information with you in the hopes that you'll learn from this mistake that I made and you'll do better.
Right, and so that's the art of the science of sharing your past with your children. Make sure they understand that my sins are my own. Nor, you know, they're not yours. You don't have to make them, nor is it a challenge. I'm not challenging you to go do even more new creative stupidity than I was able to accomplish. That would be the opposite lesson. Let's see where we go from here. You like that one? That's a tough one. I know people who feel the exact opposite, but I think that's absolutely right. Absolutely correct. You correcting my English, or are you agreeing? No. No, I'm good with either. It worked either way. Yes, and we're going to get there.
We're learning this right now with our oldest and you know, dealing forward, just starting in sports.
Yep.
And when we first started talking about sports and what do you guys want to do, et cetera, we had to take a step back and say, well, you're going to do one thing, you're going to do one thing instead of going,
Yeah.
because I don't.
Children love to check boxes that they want to do because they have no understanding of the commitment on their own part, and two, everything that goes on behind the curtain when mom's got her board out and she's like, I got to have Timmy here and Billy here and Jody here, and all of a sudden your day becomes a car race. Now, if you have a lot of children, that's sort of inevitable if you put them into activities. But what we're talking about here is, and you're exactly right, that is a great example. When you allow that child to become the center of your universe, other things have to move aside. And then you've got a damaged relationship, usually between 2 spouses. And what is the goal for this little person? I said it once or twice. To leave. All capital letters. Leave. You must go. Find your promised land. Because that's how I think we know they're happy, healthy. And I'm not talking about leave as in separate from my life. Plenty of cultures in the world have a combined generational culture, and I think those are phenomenal. They strengthen each other in ways that we don't get with ours, frankly.
And with that combined culture, they're usually they spend time together and they're together. And our activities, for some reason, today pull that marriage apart. So not only are men and women apart for their work day, following their work day, men and women, or husbands and wives, are running children around to separate activities. And so you know, people talk about, well, we just, you know, we grew apart. Well, yeah, because you were never together. And so you've got to remind yourself, when you got married to be together, do not let those children interfere with that central marriage.
We talked about this last week when we talked about marriage. What's the priority order? Go ahead, Hans. Did I misspell something? Yes. And so, however, last week I said, you know, you can throw those children in because I'm always looking for people to be serving. And so I'll serve my children first. Correction. I will serve my children. But before I serve myself, was what I wanted to say. The priority is always God, then my wife, then my children, then me. And I feel like that's in the right order for me as an individual. I feel it would be the right order for anyone as an individual, because everyone in that list is serving someone else on the way up. And so, it protects my relationship with God. I mean, Proverbs and Psalms and Ecclesiastes are your life book. And you can't find, the way to go unless you look in there. And I think that if you use those as the roadmap, God, one, is always first, and two, all this wisdom He's giving away gives us a roadmap for our lives. And He's very clear about what we do there and with it and in it. And I'll say it again for maybe the fourth time this morning. What is the goal for these little people we're raising? Yes, to leave. She says that, to become fully functional members of society. I like that. To leave. Right. And then when they're gone, we have the problems Tracy talked about, where we realize that for 20 years we placed a gap between us, and I've forgotten your face and my love for you, and I think that we have problems when all we have is distance. And distance can be hard to cover. Give me just a second, sir. Yes, ma'am.
This is question of the culture. I am from another culture. For us, it's different. We keep family together. In my house, 4 generations live together. When my granny sleep, my father say, "Granny is sleeping." That means calm down. And from the beginning, it means that I'm not in the middle. But here, I'm not seeing that. Here, children are in the middle. You are talking one stuff, but you are not doing that. You are not taking care in the way the children. It's kind of weird for me. Why you have so many children if you just want to keep them out from me?
Right. So
We are keeping our children with us. And generation is learning from the generation. It's very important when you bring the little child at home. My mother helped me so much, and I worked because I know the child is with family, and this family will take better care of him maybe than I do. But it also give me one respect to this family. My son, when my mother was dying, he was sitting with her. He showed more empathy to her than I do, because I have some other stuff. My son was 17 years old when his father died. It was very nice what these gentlemen there say, the man. But what if there's no man in the house? If the woman
well,
is
that's a different topic. So I'm gonna cut you off. I do agree, and so a little bit we're just talking past each other. Everybody loves to have their children around. We do have a difference in culture to where we think that around is probably in the same town, but not in the house with us. And I agree there are benefits and value added to the way you did it. So, for instance, what I expected you to say was, I was first in my family. The reason I thought you would say that is because I believe that's exactly the way it felt in the social structure you were brought up in. Your grandmother was there, and every day you needed her, she was there. Your mother was there when you needed her, and she was there. And your father was there. And how could you not feel like the center of everything when they were giving themselves to you like that? But that's from your child perspective was going to be my answer. And really, they were taking care of themselves and reinforcing that social culture that you have. And I think it's beautiful.
As a caveat to that, there are those of us that were raised without father. I being one of them, my brother. It has always been since the beginning of what we believe to be time, which being creation, that the devil has been trying to break down the family structure forever in our time. And so what we're talking about is how God wished it to be and wanted it to be and wants us to do. And yes, there are those of us who had to do it differently, but God was still there present.
And I acknowledge that. I was raised by a tribe of women. Friday night, I didn't say this part of the joke, but I made the joke that women seem to have a natural inclination to offer Ray Fuller advice. I like to think it's because they realize I've been raised by women and it makes me accessible. I realize that it's probably the fact that they think it's something else entirely. It's about so, yes, ma'am.
I think another thing is when the children are above the
think I understood it. I always hear it explained from the other side. Before you speak, I got to go to Joe.
One of the concepts that I think I feel I need to mention is this concept called tough love.
We're going to get to love, so let me hold it. Let me hold off, because yes, love has a whole lot of definitions in different cultures. So I'm going to move on after Tracy speaks into the next part.
I was just gonna say, when, kind of what, like Derek said, you take a step back, it's like, that needs to happen in a lot of ways. For instance, like the elaborate birthday parties and the elaborate things that happen that are child-centered today. You know, I remember somebody stressing financially because they needed to plan this big birthday party, and I was like, why? Who says you have to have a birthday party? I don't think my children are any worse for the wear that I never had a big birthday party for them, ever, right? So, you know, and I grew up in the country, and we were far from town as a child. I never got to be in dance. I didn't get to be in gymnastics.
Yeah, the only dance you had was in your living room in the kitchen. Yeah.
So, you know.
All right, one more. Go ahead.
Well, and I was just going to say that your comment is don't allow your home or marriage to become child-centered. But I think one of the biggest problems in our culture and society in America today is that we're letting other people raise our children. We're sending them to school and we're expecting them to teach them the things that we want them taught, and then we act like we don't know why they don't turn
Right.
out.
I agree it's a problem in society. I don't understand why it's a problem amongst Christians. The Bible clearly says whose responsibility is. That's Deuteronomy 6 and 7.
I get that, but I don't think we're always doing
So you want to talk about others who aren't present? Is that what we're doing?
No.
No, I'm winking at you. I'm just kidding. I agree it's a problem.
But it's easy for us to fall into that because the society says this is what we do, and we just do the same thing everybody else does.
So there are mechanisms to present that, because what you're talking about is how do you combat your children being programmed by someone other than you? They're little computers. We did that at dinner table every night. How was your day? We discussed it, and then we discussed what they did right. Because Mama always taught me three things. Say something nice, say something not so nice, say something nice again. What they did right, what they did wrong, and then praise them again. And then send them back into battle the next day. I'm going to put a lid on this topic in just a moment. I got two more people.
I guess I really feel like I understand the principle of you raise your kids so they can grow up and be independent on their own. But to love God and serve God, that's a goal of parenting.
That's the only goal, is what I would add to that. The only goal of being a parent is to raise children who love God. If they love God, everything else just gets rolled out in front of them. Sir. Can I ask you to hold it just a minute? Because we are going to discuss love. And you're right, and I knew that would come up, so let's race toward it. Joe, go ahead, Amy.
I have two things. My parents have been a very good example of not making sure that kids are the center. I would even slow that down to grandchildren. You know, my parents actually moved away because my brother was using them too much. And they, as husband and wife, they've been married for 50 million years. And part of that's because we were never their center.
Yeah, I didn't want to touch it here. That's a next week topic. We're going to discuss grandmother culture and how it can smother your children. And some of you grandmas are going to feel a little hurt, but that's because if it hurts, then it's probably accurate.
I was also going to take the child-centered thing down even more to more granular level. You know, even as a woman, as a mother, I am not just a mother. I mean, I have other things outside of them, so that someday when they do leave, my world is not going to come crumbling down.
Yes. Sir.
Ray, this is kind of a footnote, but because lots of us are all done raising our kids.
We're going to talk about you and with you next week. I need your advice.
But one of the things that I would caution us all, even young people here who might look forward to 20 years, we did the best we could do to be a Christian household, and yet we still occasionally beat ourselves up saying, where did we go wrong or whatever. I don't think we should ever do that kind of
Right. The concept is carrying guilt forward and holding on to it for mistakes in your children that you see in their adult life. But we're going to talk about that next week too, if I can, please. Because I think it's important, because the problem there isn't the child. The problem there is our relationship with God and whether or not we truly believe He's forgiven us when we hand something over and walk away from it. And it's hard to do when it's about something you love.
Because I was going to say, because our kids saw that we base our lives on service to God, even though they didn't all embrace that once they were grown up, they still live a caring, loving lifestyle of their own.
You just did the whole lesson for next week. I love it when you do that. I need to write down the 3 points you just made, because they're a huge part of the next lesson, and I love the way you said it.
But that's also part of that, too.
Yes. So let's get to teach emotional maturity. There's nothing more destructive in any relationship's life cycle than an emotionally immature person. It will always end catastrophically. It must. Because if you're emotionally immature, you have to have that emotionally immature moment, and it only creates confusion, dissension, mistrust, distrust, resentment, and it's horrible. And however, all children are little emotional bags of wow, right? Because you aren't born emotionally mature. It has to be demonstrated, and it has to be enforced. I love 2-year-olds because of the meltdown. And it's like, dude, have your moment. I'm enjoying this as much as you are. Yeah, that's right. When you're done, come back to me. The best one I ever heard was someone had a child who tried holding her breath. And they let her. And I think it was you. You were sharing this story with me last week, Troy. Not that it was one of Troy's kids, but Troy was a part of a niece moment. And it's beautiful, right? Because if she holds her breath long enough, she will, in fact, pass out. You've just got to make sure that there's, soft landing area and a child aspirin ready for when she wakes up, because she's going to have that I held my breath till I passed out headache. But nothing has changed about their situation. And all you've done is reinforce to them that they can't break you and make you do what they want. And it's an amazing teachable moment. And there's a moment like that in every 2 or 3-year-old's life somewhere. And if you don't execute it to standard, from that moment forward, they own you. I promise you this. Can we remember one? Because you've got little ones. Is it close enough in your mind that you remember one?
2 or 3, but we're sitting here saying 5, 6.
Okay. Okay.
Ah, 4-year-old doesn't.
They extended that out to about 5 or 6. So it happens, but at some point.
Well, and I'll say, and I've had some other women reinforce this, that a lot of women never become emotionally mature. And when they get into the workforce, there's that backbiting and that talking behind the back, and just this, they all have a throw emotional fits and stuff. So it's like, it's so vital that we do teach that in our home for the future.
Yeah. I made a promise to myself when my son was born that I would never lay hands on him in any way other than a hug. And I spanked him twice. He has come back to me in his adulthood. He had said, I earned that both times. Thank you for that lesson. Because I grew up in an environment that was a little choppy. It was a little, hands were quick to fly. And I didn't want that. So we had a lot of discussions. Especially when he was throwing, the fits about what I want to do and what I want to do not. It's like, no, you can't do this. And I taught him that there were times where I was going to look at him and say, we're done with this conversation now. I am simply walking away. You just don't want the answer you're being given. And off we go. And, of course, sometimes it was the opposite. You may now enter that small area of the house I call your room and stay there. Because it might be their house, but it's my home, right? How about that? I love Proverbs. I mean, if you want to live a godly life, you have to master Proverbs. I'm convinced of this. Is that a no, grr, or? Yes, ma'am.
I just wanted to say a lesson learned a little bit later in life, maybe for raising my children, but it's okay to make mistakes.
We have to make mistakes. We have to forgive ourselves.
Children learn by making mistakes, and that's okay. They're still loved. Your goal, I think, as a parent, is to ensure that the mistakes they make are good learning lessons, and do not give them a life
Yeah.
consequence that they will never recover from.
Yeah.
Death or all kinds of other,
I love it when kids make mistakes, and you look at them and you're like, you made that mistake because that situation was new to you, not new to the rest of us.
right, but they have to learn to make decisions.
Yeah.
And to listen to advice.
But this is why children never believe, you guys, I'm going to point to you just because I think you're the youngest, there's some other young people in here. You don't believe that we were ever young in the sense that we learned and made mistakes and have been through the things you have been through. No child believes this. I don't know why. And so you think everything that is new to you is new to me. It is not.
Well, and to piggyback off of that, it's important that if you make a mistake, don't hide it from your children. Show your children you made a mistake.
Yes.
Show them how to make it right, because when they get, if you hide that in your perfect,
Absolutely.
their whole lives, then they make mistakes and they try to cover it up. They try to be perfect, but it, and this piggyback all the way to
Right.
your very first comment. When if I tell my kid she can do something and she played me off my wife, and my wife goes, I told her she couldn't do that. I step right back in and say, oh, I didn't know Mom said you couldn't do that. Shut her down. I take the hit and say I was wrong.
Yeah.
And I think
Yeah, it's important that they
teach
learn that
them.
communication technique from us, with one caveat. There are some things and concepts I will not introduce to my child,
Yeah,
because he doesn't need to.
contextually.
Yeah. And so not every topic is available for discussion with a child. Some are private between me and my wife. Some are private between me and my work. But all the conditions, my goal is to set the conditions for him to have a successful life by teaching him those things in order. So here we are now, love, yes. I didn't put it on the list last because it is last. I put it on the list because it's the biggest. And everybody's got issues and discussion. And love is not the hugs and kisses only. God did not give us just hugs and kisses. There were times where God handed the tribe of Israel a mouthful of bloody chiclets. The exile, right in the face. Both of them. All of the times of the judges, all of the times they lost cities during the taking of the promised land because they wouldn't do what God said to do in order to take it the way he wanted it taken. And so there is a discipline aspect to it. Loving my child isn't creating something that's a society because I only want to pat it on the head and say, you've done so well in your horribleness. And so love is tough. I don't mean tough as in only tough love. I mean love is tough as in it is a difficult task to master. And we spend all of our lives doing it. But luckily the answer is there in the entirety of the Bible. I know a lot of people who say, well, I only study the New Testament. Well, okay, that's 1/4 of the book. Congratulations, you failed. Not that they fail as being a Christian, but they fail to study the book in its entirety. And so you can't get all of God's message if you leave out entire books, sections, chapters, portions. And it gives you a misunderstanding of who God is, not who Christ is. If you study the New Testament, you got a pretty good picture of who Christ is. But you don't know the Father. He's in the rest of it. And so we've got to have all of it. And I think that's how you develop the full view of what is love. And there have been times in my life where I was shown tough love, never by a parental figure. I didn't have them. But society took that role on, and it was a little tougher for me because of it. And so, do your job, is what I'm saying here. Now, this discussion was about really those children, let's say halfway through their teens and left towards zero. Next week, we're going to talk about the issue of adult children and being an adult child, because all of us here are an adult child of someone, and what some of that relationship looks like, and how parenting looks like from the far end to include grandparenting. Then our detour will be complete. I think we may get back into the order of the game there, depending upon whether or not we want to have a second discussion on stuff and proper management of it when we get done with that lesson next week. So, closing comments, final questions. Joe?
Well, on that tough love,
I agree. Yeah.
You understand what I'm saying? I'm trying not to preach.
No, I get it, I get it. I think everyone here understood it. It's a difficult task to master. However, I will caveat what you said with, that's not the only aspect of love Christ wants us to give.
A lot of feelings that can make, it can divide.
Right. Sir?
My family my mother had a way of talking to you about tough love. She said, this is gonna hurt me more than it
Yeah.
And you know, when you reflect on that, it's absolutely true.
It's true, but they don't get it at the time. They're thinking about their pain.
She did express it.
Right? I remember being chased around in a circle while someone was spanking me, telling me that this was because they loved me. I absolutely did not believe it. So, it is an amazing task that we're given to raise children. We just need to make sure that we do it in the way God wants us to do it. All right, thank you for your time.